Haunted Forest, full novel, length horror story, Neoth Wesen, mime fun words. They called it Black Hollow, a name that lived in the mouths of fearful children and lingered on the breath of old villagers when the lights dimmed. It wasn't marked on most maps, and when it was simply labeled undeveloped forest or private property. But everyone in the nearby town of Quang Tho called it Black Hollow, and everyone stayed away. It began with a project. Lin Nguyen, a folklore student from the University of Hanoi, had always been drawn to the macabre. Her thesis was titled The Persistence of Folkloric Entities in Remote Vietnamese Culture. The plan was simple: interview locals, document stories, and explore the supposed location of one such legend. It was supposed to be academic, clinical, professional. She brought 3 companions. Quan, her boyfriend and the group's videographer, whose calm demeanor often masked a deep paranoia. Mai, her quiet roommate, who was dragged along out of loyalty and regret. And Dewey, a skeptic and engineering student who tagged along to debunk nonsense. They rented a car loaded with camping gear, cameras, audio equipment, and food. Their target was the forest known in whispers, Black Hollow. The town at the edge, Dien Lu, was small, with crumbling yellow walls, rusted gates, and people who spoke softly and stared too long. At the only gas station, an old man stood watching them fill up. When Lean asked if he knew about the forest, he only said, "If it calls your name, do not answer." She laughed it off, but Mai's face tightened. She had heard a version of this before, from her grandmother. Black Hollow remembers. It keeps the ones who answer. They arrived at the forest trailhead by late afternoon. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the road. Trees lined the edge like soldiers. The air shifted, colder, drier. Quan noted that the GPS began to stutter. The compass needles spun. They stepped in together. It didn't take long for the silence to set in. No insects, no birds. The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums as if something were waiting. The trail grew less clear the deeper they walked. Trees twisted unnaturally. Bark bore marks, slashes, spirals, names half carved and abandoned. At dusk, they found the well. It sat in the center of a clearing too round to be natural. Ancient stone, moss-coated, its rim cracked and blackened. Cold radiated from it. Lean, ever the academic, called it a ritual nexus. Dewey scoffed. Mai wouldn't approach. They set up camp nearby, though unease hung between them. Quan filmed. Dewey explored. Mai sat in silence. Lean scribbled observations, half in awe, half in denial. That night, it began. A whisper, faint, from the trees. Lien. She woke in her tent, heart pounding. Mai had also heard it. Tears in her eyes, she said it sounded like her mother. But her mother had died last year. The next day, they tried to leave. But the forest had changed. The path they came from now split in 3, each leading into identical trees. The sun never fully rose, just a gray haze filtering through tangled branches. They followed their compass. After hours, they returned to the same clearing. The well stood exactly where they had left it. But now, there were wet footprints circling their tents. Bare. Human. That night, Mai screamed. They found her at the edge of the trees, her arms covered in scratches, eyes wild. "It was him," she said. "He whispered to me from the branches. He has no face. He wears their names." She wouldn't say who they were. Quan calmed her. Dewey grew irritable. "This is stress," he said. "Group hallucination. We need sleep, not stories." That night, Quan played back footage on his camera. For a brief second, between frames, a figure stood behind Mai during daylight. Tall, black, unnaturally thin, and then gone. They didn't sleep. The following morning, Dewey vanished. His shoes were found by the well, a red smear down the side. No struggle, no note. They searched, yelling his name. That was their mistake. The forest came alive with echo. Duyy. It didn't mimic the voice. It distorted it. Low, wet, gurgling, like someone trying to speak underwater. Then the laughter came. Not loud, but constant. A slow, slithering hiss that settled into their bones. Mai broke. She clawed at her face, screaming, "He's in my skin! He's in my skin!" They held her down. She wouldn't stop screaming until dawn. Quan stopped filming. They tried again to leave, this time without a plan, just running. But no matter which way they turned, the trees seemed to bend toward them. Lean noticed carvings in the bark that resembled their names. Hers was fresh, still bleeding. On the 5th day, they stopped keeping track of time. Their watches died. The air was always dim. Food spoiled. Water turned black in bottles. The forest breathed at night, deep, slow, like lungs under the soil. And the well, something had begun whispering from it. Not words, just sounds, sloshing, breathing, a wet hand brushing stone. Then Mai walked into the forest and didn't come back. Lean followed the trail, found her notebook near a tree. The last entry was a child's handwriting. It read, "I see her now. She is waiting in the roots." Lean didn't remember writing it. Quan refused to speak. He sat by the well, staring into it. She begged him to move. He didn't blink. When she touched his shoulder, he whispered, "He's in the lens." "What lens?" "The camera," he said, smiling. "He can see through it. He watches. He remembers." That night, she destroyed the camera. Quan screamed like it was his skin being burned. The next day, he was gone. Only his jacket remained, nailed to a tree with no nails. Lean was alone. She began to change. First, she heard footsteps that weren't hers. Then shadows walked beside her. Sometimes she would see Mai at the edge of her vision, smiling, mouth full of teeth that weren't hers. She no longer remembered why she came. At night, the well pulsed. It whispered names. Names she didn't recognize. Some ancient, some hers. She found a cave behind the well one day. The entrance was obscured by roots. Inside, carvings filled the walls, scenes of people bowing to a tall figure, a woman, hair long, face blank. Beneath her feet were bones. The final carving showed her turning into a tree. Lean finally understood. The forest was her, the witch, the mother, the forgotten name, the woman from 1,000 years ago who was cursed for asking too much. She wasn't dead. She was the forest. And now she was hungry. Lean tried to resist, but her name echoed now, in every rustle, every branch. Her body weakened. Roots grew through her tent. Her voice cracked when she tried to scream. Her dreams were no longer dreams. They were memories of rituals, of betrayal. On the final day, she sat by the well and whispered her own name. 3 months later, a rescue team found the campsite. Only torn fabric, rotten food, and a single notebook remained. In the last page, scribbled in charcoal, was a single sentence. "The forest is a mouth, and it speaks your name before it swallows." One member of the rescue team disappeared that night, and the others refused to speak of what they saw. But they all have one thing in common. None of them remember their own names.